said instructional. Can you unmute and tell?
I put it because he could read, one mistake, that's really good for a D, for a D. And I think with the questions, that is what you can do during guided reading, is to review and practice that. So that's why I say it's instructional, because he can read it. If you go back down, he's not going to advance anymore.
Thank you, Lauren. Who can give their argument to Lauren as to why this would be a frustrational level?
I said that he scored at a frustrational because I gave his comprehension score a 5. But I would override it and teach at instructional. But I had him score in the 5 mark.
Awesome. Okay, so you're saying you would, so in guided reading, you would still put him at a level.
Yeah, because his C was independent, so I teach him at a D.
Okay.
Now.
So it looks like you and Lauren would still instruct him in guided reading at the same level.
But I think it's different because half a point can go from instructional to frustrational.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Point.
Yep. Would you put Alexis during guided reading? Would you put a C book or a D book in front of him?
I would put a D book in front of him.
Lauren, what would you put in front of him?
I'd put a D, because yes, he scored frustrational, but I would have overrode it to do the same thing. I mean, that's where he needs to practice at. And who knows, maybe he'll be ready if you work with him for an E. Who knows?
Yep. Alan, good question. What do you guys think? Should we try him at an E? Can somebody unmute and talk to Alan about this? Should we try him at an E?
My question is, let's say you work with him in guided reading, if you do him, since he's so high, first, and you work with him, could you then, after you review a little bit with comprehension and that and retell, could you then maybe test him in a week or so?
Lauren, that's a really good question. Alan, good question. I'm glad you guys brought it up. Let me hold on to it for just a second. Would anybody argue that you would put a C book in front of him, not a D book? No? Okay. Oh, okay. So the moment you've all been waiting for. Oh, could we retest fiction D? Hold that thought. Okay, so this is what I did. So I love this example because originally I thought, I had him at like frustrational because he's literally in between. It's like crazy close, right? But the reason I pushed Lauren and Alexis is because in the end, they both ended up in picking that they would instruct the student at a level D, regardless of if it was his actual instructional or if it was his frustrational. He was so on the border that if we go back to our norming sheet, if we kept him on a level C, he passed it. So we're not really making an impact with him at the guided reading table because we already know that he can read a level C book. So in this situation, I would either override the frustrational to becoming his instructional level, or if you had instructional level, would keep it at his instructional level. And then in the chat box, where would you coach the student at your guided reading table? So let's say we put a level D in front of the student. Where are you coaching this student at the table? Go ahead and put that in the chat box. Yep. Exactly. Main idea in retail. If you find something to coach, you found the level. Don't overthink it. To Alan's question, could we try an E? I wouldn't try an E because you found something to coach. We see that he needs to understand that when he retells, he's got to include a main idea. We also see that he didn't know the main idea. So I would not, Alan, test at a level E. However, Lauren, to your point, if you see, I mean, it's pretty clear what he needs. Let's say we do 2 weeks of guided reading instruction and we see he's like ready, you know, he moved pretty quickly because his accuracy was already super high. At that point, Lauren, just informally, running record, move him up and start instructing him at an E. I think that a lot of times we keep our kids at a level for way too long. So once you see that he's starting to retell and get the main idea, I would bump him up to keep pushing that student, because we know that a lot of our students need to move sometimes 6 levels just in 1 year. So I hope that answers both of your questions. Someone asked about, oh, was someone saying something?
I was going to, Mallory.
Go ahead. No, you're.
If I looked at, I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but if I looked at the E, the comprehension questions, because the part where I'm kind of struggling was he can read the words. He has the phonics skills. He has the decoding. He has all those skills. So wouldn't the comprehensions be the same at an E? So I could coach him on an E in my guided reading group because I'm working on those same comprehension skills.
Okay. Yeah, Alan, that's a good point. I would probably put him at a D. However, if you have a group of E readers, you could argue putting him there because it could easily, like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of time, like our assessment says, like you can group level D and E's together. I just wouldn't group anything more than a level difference together. So absolutely, like if I came in your room and saw him at an E table, you know what I mean? I think that's totally fine because you still know what to coach him on and you're actually pushing the rigor a little bit more to bump that student. Love that question. I wouldn't want to see him in like an F or G group, if that makes sense.
Mallory, I have a question.
Okay.
Will this data follow the students to their next grade level? Because I know I've had some like students in my own building transfer to me and their data didn't follow. So I will just want to make sure the other teacher has what they need for next year.
So in your situation, the CDA has been, as we know, a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
But I'm writing your question down. We were told when we bought this assessment that it will follow the data from year to year, but I'm going to actually email after this meeting to make sure, and I will let you know.
Mallory, can I answer that also?
Yes, Shanna. Yeah.
So there is a drop down in the digital manager that lets you switch years. So after we have additional data on a kid, you can go back and see their years of data. But it usually is within the same school or it's at the end of the, after they've shut out the year. One of the things we're doing to combat that is we have started exports and we are uploading into Panorama. So we're hoping that that is actually launched, at least the reading levels and the spelling. I want to say step 2, 3, and 4 will be actually in Panorama so that you can see that line trend for a student moving forward as our backup.
So do I need to click? Never mind. I'm sure you'll, never mind. Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so shout out to Danielle Kidwell at Asbury because she was like, we need to get a little bit more nitty gritty into this assessment because there's like specific questions that everyone's grading, you know, differently, and it's 100% true. So I have a series here of questions that she raised, that I raised, that we're going to norm on that are with the books that you guys are probably going to assess this next round. So these are fiction books. So if you read, go ahead and take a second and just read. You guys probably know this story if you've assessed before. This is a level A, and if you need to get out your kit, that's why I asked you guys to have it next to you. This is the story, I Want a Pet. And this is the first comprehension question. So I'm going to give you guys a second to get situated. And then I want you to tell me the answer is that we want the student to say is because she is allergic. But what I'm telling you that they're saying is in red. So I want you guys to tell me if you would give the student a 1, a 0.5, or a 0. Interesting. So, I mean, you guys can see why we need to norm, right? Some people are saying 0.5, some people are saying 0. And in this situation, we see that comprehension is what held the student back. So it's like super important that we're aligned in how we grade this. So, example 1. I'm sorry. So to answer your question, I'm going to go back here. If a student answers because cats are mean and they can scratch, before we just grade it and give them a 0, they didn't get it, or a 0.5, we want to prompt them. Okay? I feel like what's happening is we're just like quick to go to the grade. We want to prompt them, because if we prompt them, it could change the answer quite drastically, actually. So don't just give a 0. Let's go through, just read example 1. Let's say student answers because cats are mean. Teacher prompts and says, what makes you think that? Student says, because it's all caged up. I gave a 0.5 because this is a character analysis question. It says that on the sheet. In a character analysis question, if the student can give a reasonable answer and they can use the picture to help defend that answer, it's not going to be a 0, because they had some of that skill. They didn't have the right answer though, right? They had, like, they said, I mean, it's a reasonable answer. Like, they're mean and they're using the picture and they're saying, like, it's all caged up. Like, that's why I think they're mean. It was a reasonable answer, but it wasn't the right answer. So in that situation, I would give the child a 0.5. Does that make sense? We're going to go through 4 different ones. But you'll notice in every example I prompted. Example 2, because cats scratch. Okay, so what makes you think that? At home, my cat scratches a lot. Why did I give a 0? Can someone unmute? Why did I give a 0?
I'm on the 0.
Is it because they didn't make a connection to the book?
Did they use the picture?
No.
Nope. And was the answer right?
No.
No. Good. Like,
So I do have a question though.
okay.
So does it not mean anything that they actually made a connection to real life?
Good question, Melissa.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. No, I know. I battled with Jana on this one for about 15 minutes in our office. She kept pushing me on, like, a character analysis question is like, are they using this picture to analyze the character, and like in this example, because that would be a different kind of question, like a text to self connection, Melissa. And so in this situation, I mean, I would give a 0. Now, like, maybe you could prompt again, and you know what I mean, and see if they could get there. And if it's going to be like the one question holding the student back from instructing them on a D, use your teacher judgment. Example 3, because cats shed everywhere. Teacher prompts and says, how do you know? And then the student says, because the mommy is sneezing. So in this situation, do you see how you take a 0.5 answer and make it a 1? Like, the student knew, but he had a hard time expressing, like, exactly why. He didn't ever say allergic, but in this situation, did the child comprehend this page? I think they did. Example 4, because cats scratch. How do you know? I don't know. So in this situation, a 0, right? They're not really, they don't understand. The question is, the answer is allergic, right? So automatically they're off, but then they're not really even giving any explanation at all as to why they felt that. So in that situation, I would give a 0. So the biggest things with this question would be, if a student can give a reasonable answer using a picture to help them, give a 0.5. If the student can give a reasonable answer but doesn't use a picture to help them or doesn't answer the follow-up question, give a 0. If the student answers the right answer, they would receive a 1. Does that make sense? Oops. And don't feel hesitant to push on this, because I'm telling you, like, I talked to a lot of people about this before presenting to you guys. All right, let's go to a level.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
So you
go ahead.
prompt again. How many times is acceptable to
For
prompt?
prompting, yeah.
Like
I have never.
but
Oh, sorry, I cut you off. Sorry.
okay. So you on the one question you said I would prompt them again and see, but like how many promptings would be acceptable?
Okay.
Like, because then you're just pushing them into the right answer. So would you say like 2 times, or I mean, obviously it could depend on what they're saying, but in general, what would you say?
Yep. So that's an awesome question. I would never prompt more than 2. I've seen a lot of different assessments, and the most assessment I've ever seen is that you can prompt up to 2 times, but being very vague about how you prompt. If you find that you're having to prompt more than that, they're not there. Yeah. Really, really good question. Others? Okay. All right. Now we're on level C, going to grandma's house. If you need your book, go ahead and get it out, or the running record. This is the comprehension question for going to grandma's house, level C, and it's asking, who is telling you the story? They want the answer to be the girl, but the student says the author. What would you do? Go ahead and put that in the chat box. What would you do? Okay, so you're starting to get it. Yes, let's prompt. Let's prompt, okay? That's the first step. The answer actually isn't the author, because the person that wrote the story isn't the girl. It's just told from her point of view. Yeah, the author, yeah. Yep, thank you, Erica. Okay, so this is a tricky one. So we're gonna prompt them. Who is the author? If a student can then say the girl, we're gonna give them the point, right? Do you see how that takes them from like a 0 to a 1 just because she prompted? If a student cannot, we're gonna give the 0 because the author isn't the girl. It's not right, okay? Questions, arguing about that one? Makes sense? Because we're about to give this assessment. Okay. Number 3, this is level D, Rainbow Day. It's a comprehension question. How do the girls' feelings change throughout the story? The answer is, first she was sad, then she was happy. And the question is, can we rephrase this question to, how do the girls' feelings change from the beginning to the end? Go ahead and type your answer in the chat box. Can we rephrase the question? Okay, I'm glad we did this one. Lindsay, you got it. So everyone said yes right away. We're going to read the question as stated first. So you don't want to go right into rewording, because if we start to get into that habit, we lower the rigor bar without even realizing it. So we want to start by asking the question stated first. And I did a really bad example of modeling this because in the video you saw me do, I immediately changed the question. We don't want to do that. If a student just looks at you, then you can reword the question up to 1 time. Make sense? Okay. Rainbow Day. So this is question 4. What does the weather have to be like to make a rainbow? The answer we want to hear is sunny, rainy, and wet. But let's just say a student says one of them. What do we do? Awesome, awesome. Yep, okay. So we're going to prompt. Let's say that the student doesn't have anything else. What would their score be? If they just say sunny. Let's see. So you got it. We're going to prompt them. In this situation, they need to say more than one to get full credit because it takes more than one to form a rainbow. Does that make sense?